Hi, I'm Amy. Thank you for tuning in. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by the author of my most recent read, Benjamin Dean. He is the author of very popular middle grade books. But I, of course, being that I love YA, I'm most excited about The King is Dead, his YA debut, which comes out in July this year. So welcome, Ben. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be talking about King is Dead for the very first time, I think. I don't think I've done enough.
Oh, brilliant. Well, I'm glad to break you in with hopefully gently with our first lot of questions. So let's start with an easy one. Can you start by telling us a little bit about the book?
Yeah, you say an easy one, but I was saying to you just before it started, this is the point where you start thinking you know your book and then someone asks you and you're like, maybe I don't know.
Let's try it out.
Yeah, no, The King is Dead. It's my YA debut, comes out in July. It's pitched as Gossip Girl, but make it royal, so it's got a royal twist. It's like a Black LGBTQ plus reimagining of the royal family. And it's all about 17-year-old James, who's like a reluctant heir to the throne. And upon the death of his father, he's suddenly thrust onto the throne as a 17-year-old, and he becomes the first Black monarch of the country. He has a lot of secrets that he's trying to keep kind of in his grasp and not let them out. But when his secret boyfriend goes missing, all of those secrets start to be leaked out to the press. And he starts to realize he can't trust many people around him, if anybody. So it's Gossip Girl, but make it royal.
That is such a good pitch and such a good book too. I mean, I think when I was reading it, I was trying to drawing all those comparisons and thinking of how well you did it, especially compared with the Gossip Girl books. Like, they have nothing on your book. There's so many secrets and twists and lies. It's so good. So on the subject of the royal family, as I was reading it, I was just struck by the details of Buckingham Palace and the little like ways that everything works. How did you research that? Did you make any of it up, or did you kind of go on reality with it?
Well, I am a huge fan of, I'm about to reveal all of my my secret hobbies, but I really love Princess Diana documentaries. I'm obsessed with the story of Princess Diana. Maybe obsessed is the wrong word because it makes it sound like I'm using it as like entertainment when it's a real person's life. But I find the story of Diana from start to finish so enthralling. And I already had a fair grasp of the royal landscape through those documentaries and kind of how they act and how they like their own traditions and what they do, and I'd been thinking for a while about doing something royal based. So when I came up with the idea for this, I was like, okay, well, I have a base to work up from having watched the documentary, so what else can I do? So I kind of got a biography of Diana. I think it's probably like the best-selling biography of Diana. It's like I can't remember what it's called, but it's like a neon pink book that you can't miss. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was reading it, and the story is just so heartbreaking, so honest, and there's a lot to take in. So I was going through that. I made notes. I was kind of annotating the books. First time I've ever annotated the book. I know lots of people do that, but I'd never annotated the book before. I was going through. I was making my little notes, and then obviously, at the beginning of the story, James, my main character, his father dies, which makes him king. And I'd been researching, years ago, I'd seen that story of what happens if the queen dies, bit of a touchy subject. But I'd been reading the Operation London Bridge and all of the protocols that happen. So I kind of refreshed my memory of that. And then I chopped away the bits that wouldn't really work in a story. I was like, okay, I see what happens step by step, but I need this to happen here, so I need to take that out and kind of do my own thing. So it was kind of a mix of research and things that are actually happening in the royal family with my own twist on them. I think at one point I even I'm a huge fan of coffee table books. I'm a very visual person, and I had a Buckingham Palace coffee table book. And they basically commissioned a photographer to come in and take fancy pictures of all of the staterooms and all of that. But at the beginning of the book, it had a floor plan of Buckingham Palace.
All right.
And it obviously didn't include like private quarters or whatever, but it was so useful because for ages I'd been like, I know roughly where things are in the palace, but like realistically, can they get from here to here quickly, efficiently? So little things like that I kind of included in the book, and it really helped me to be able to like visually describe the palace in particular. But yeah, it was a lot of research mixed with some of my own thoughts and reimaginings of the palace.
Yeah, you did a good job. It came across as very authentic, but also felt like there wasn't any unnecessary detail, because obviously you're a fan of this kind of stuff. You could have easily turned it into like a 1,000 page epic on the royal family as you see them.
Yeah, I mean, my editor, I remember during the editing period, she'd ask me a question, and like in response, I'd given like 1,000-word response, being like, "Well, actually, so when this happens, this is what happens in it. This is what the royals do, and they do this, that, and the other." And then I was like, "Ben, please, they don't need to know all of this. They just say yes or no."
Oh, I love how you've got a proper area of expertise. Mine were just like in Buffy, like somebody early on was like, oh, the Buffy TV series or something out there. And I was like, let me tell you about the 1990s movie. It's so good. And like, that's as far as my expert knowledge goes. So yeah, it's good that you have a real grounding that, you know, brought this story to life.
Yeah, I should also point out, I'm very aware and worried that people think I'm like some die-hard royalist or something. I'm really not. I'm enthralled by the monarchy and the royal family, for better or worse. But my allegiance really lies with Diana. I have a real I really love the story of Diana, so that's where my knowledge of the royal family comes from, just through her.
Well, I think it was really balanced how you didn't portray like this kind of glossy, like I think in a lot of fantasy books they go one of two ways. It's either awful to be royal and like they hate every minute, and I think you showed the kind of that there are some perks of it, although James doesn't always see them. And you kind of showed that it is day to day really hard for him, and also to carry that weight that you have just inherited something and you've gone through something really traumatic to get to this point. Yeah, I just thought you did it really well. So that actually leads me on to something else, which I find quite difficult as an author. Like I tend to come at character or plot first or setting, and then I weave in the themes and stuff. And I thought that you handled really big issues really beautifully. Like your characters tackle racism and they experience grief and all these big things like betrayal and secrets and trust. I wondered, did those ideas come to you first, or did you come up with the plot and the characters and you kind of seeded those things in afterwards?
I think the latter. I came up with the concept first. I knew I basically, the question was, what would it be like if there was a king who looked like me and identified like me? And then I wanted to squeeze into a YA book. So I was like, okay, he's also 17. So what happens when you're 17 and you take the throne? I was also kind of obsessed with, I know like in history there are like stories of like babies who are like 6 months old inheriting the throne or something, and I was like, okay, I don't want to go that far down, but I was like, what would happen if you were 17 and you're kind of not really qualified to take the throne just yet, and you didn't think you'd take it so soon? So yeah, I came at it from a very from a concept point of view first, and then the characters kind of bled into that as well. And I knew where I wanted to go with it. I knew what I wanted to touch upon, and I knew what big scenes would be coming. So from there, that kind of informed what themes I wanted to kind of weave into the story. Obviously, there had to be grief because his father dies, and that was really tricky to balance actually, because I really, at some point, I really wanted to move past that and address the rest of the story, but I had to remember it's his father who's died. He's really close with his father, and he has to experience this grief and betrayal kind of throughout the stories. So it's really difficult to balance. But yeah, definitely themes of, obviously this is a book that's kind of set in the current day, just in an alternate world where the royal family are Black and queer. And if that was now, unfortunately, I'm pretty sure that the monarch would be experiencing a lot of, and we've seen it with Meghan Markle, you would be experiencing a lot of racism, a lot of criticism. James would probably experience a lot of homophobia. And so those naturally kind of bled into the work, and I knew that I had to address them properly. There was a point at the very beginning of drafting where I was like, how political do we want to get in this? Do I really want to push that envelope? So I think I struck a balance between touching upon the themes that I really wanted to touch upon, while also kind of keeping it in the story and kind of moving it all forward without weighing it down too much. Fingers crossed I did it okay.
Yeah, you did, because I was just thinking about it from an author's point of view. I tried to read as a reader if I can, so that I can like really enjoy books, but I was also deconstructing it a little bit and thinking, like, you did this really well. I'm not a person who reads much about grief because I find it quite difficult, and it sort of pulls me into, I think I'm a bit of an emotional reader and it pulls me into a bit of despair. But the book didn't do that. I found it really fun and gripping, and the thriller, I think, drove the story forward. And you just got this really good balance that the themes and the big ideas were threaded through, but kind of not at the expense of still an enjoyable and immersive reading experience. So yeah, well done you, basically. That's why I want to ask that question. I need to learn how to do this, then teach me.
Thank you so much.
So on that subject of characters, I just really loved your characters, especially I'm going to say some of them I loved, and then some I'm not going to mention, because I think part of the joy of this book is working out who you can trust and who you can't. But I think it's fairly safe to say that I love James. Like, I thought that he was very well drawn and believable. It just felt like what would happen if a black queer teenager was put into this role. I completely believed it. Like, I was sold. Our real family were just set to one side, and like this was the reality as I was reading. So how do you approach that? Like, how do you construct characters like that just feel so real, like the kind of the good and the bad characters? I say in inverted commas, good and bad, you know.
Yeah. I think to be honest, I think I put accidentally, but I've started to do it more on purpose now because I'm drawing upon something that makes things easier. I think I put a lot of myself in my characters, especially my main characters, and that works in my middle grade books as well as my YA books. I don't put like all of myself, they're not like a caricature of me or like a version of me, but I take elements of myself and my voice and my feelings and I put them into these characters. James was always going to be a reluctant heir to the throne. He's not the person who would kind of take this role with ease. He doesn't want it. He knows his brother would make a much better monarch, and he knows probably anyone else in his family would take on that mantle better than he would. So I always knew that he wouldn't want to take the job but has no choice. That's one thing about like the crown, is that it's you go down the order of succession and there's no ifs, ands or buts. You can abdicate, but that doesn't apparently go down very well. So yeah, I was like, he wants to protect his family, he wants to protect himself, he wants to make his father proud, he wants to prove people wrong. So these were all aspects of James that I was thinking of, and obviously I think that made him automatically a bit of a like three-dimensional character when I was thinking of him, because he was like a real person to me. And I felt really like I was trying to nurture him throughout the book, which is really horrible when I had to put him through some really horrible things. But I really felt protective of him. But I really, really enjoyed developing the characters like around James and in the royal circle and outside of the royal circle. You know, we have a royal reporter called Quinn Buckley, who is awful. He absolutely horrible. He was an awful character to write, but he was at the same time kind of a bit of fun to write because he was just so bad, and I got to kind of put all of my all of the things I hate in other people about kind of racism, homophobia, transphobia, etc. I just got to put all of that into this awful character and then try and figure out how to use that in the story. Quinn was definitely someone who has his own wants and desires in the story. But a character I really enjoyed developing was the Queen Mother, Alexandra. She is James and Eddie's mum, Eddie being James's brother. I can't remember if I said that. But she was really great because she's like a perfectly flawed character. I always wanted her to be really perfect at the outset, but I realized that was it made her a really flat character. And as I was going through, I can't say too much without spoiling anything, but there are certain aspects of the book where you realize she's far from perfect, but she's doing her best. And I really cherish her as a character. And I think Alexandra really taught me, it sounds so weird to say she taught me something because she's a figment of my own imagination. So did I teach myself? I don't know. But Alexandra really taught me about developing characters and writing characters and giving them the ability to be flawed and maybe do things that maybe readers won't like. Maybe readers will turn against her at some point, or maybe they won't. Maybe they'll fully support her. But writing flawed aspects of her and then writing why and how we got to that point, I really enjoyed writing her as a character, and I think it taught me a lot about writing. So yeah, characters I think naturally develop for me as I'm writing and as I figure out what they want, where the story's going and how they're reacting to it. I think putting myself in their shoes is the most important aspect because I have to make sure that I'm being honest to them and their intentions throughout the book.
Yeah, I think that you did that really well. And I enjoyed how you peeled the layers back from characters, that I felt like I'd got somebody like, yeah, I understand them and I know what makes them tick. And then you find another layer and you're like, oh, wow, okay, that's good. That's interesting. And yeah, I think that is one of the real joys of the book for me, was trying to work out where you were going with it. And I mentioned to Ben beforehand, I won't spoil anything, but the twist like really got me. And it doesn't happen very often. Like literally every single thing, like it made sense. They were really well drawn, but I just didn't see them coming until after the fact. It's like, oh yeah, I should have got that, but that makes total sense. And that's the perfect kind of twist, isn't it? Because I think a twist that doesn't make any sense, like you're like, that character wouldn't have done that. No, that would annoy me. And a twist that's too obvious would annoy me too. And I thought you just did it really well.
Yeah, I was really, really worried about the twist, or because I knew I would have a moment where I would have some form of plot twist before I even started writing the book. And I knew, I was like, it can't be like a rug pull. It can't be something that's like out of nowhere and the reader would never have been able to guess. Because it works in some ways, I guess, but for a lot of readers, that's frustrating when they can't, it was impossible for them to have solved the mystery because they didn't have the information. So I really struggled. I agonized over the plot twist for ages, but I'm glad to hear that it at least it worked for you. So I'm glad that's fine.
Yeah, in my first book, I had a plot twist that I was really proud of, and then the second one, I felt under great pressure to deliver that kind of subtle twist that's not so subtle that everybody feels cheated. So yeah, you did it well. If I think a lot about plot twist, I was looking for them and they still got me. So
I'm glad.
That was really good. Just going to consult the questions. So I feel like I've taken you off on a little tangent.
No.
Oh, so we haven't really talked yet about your writing process. I know that you talked about where you get ideas from, but once you've got that idea, what happens next?
So I tend to I tend to write a short part of the book, whether it usually does turn out to be the very beginning of the book, and in this case it was the beginning. I tend to give myself a chapter or 3 chapters or whatever to try and figure out tone, voice, where we are, where the setting is, who main characters, side characters are, etc. So I've done that with all of my books. My middle grade books are more voice-led and character-driven, and I explored the story once I'd figured out the voice and the character. But with King, I had this broad concept and this grand setting, and I knew what the hook was. I knew the boyfriend was going to go missing and the secrets were going to start to be leaked. So yeah, I think when it came to writing it, I had to then do something I've never done before, which was like properly sit down and plan things out. I'm not the best planner because I get impatient. I just want to move on and get into the story. And with my middle grade books, because they are character and voice driven, it's easier to say, okay, this is the end point and we're going to hit A, B, C, and D. But how we get there, I don't know. We're going to figure it out as we're writing through the character. With King, I couldn't do that because I had to have plot twists. I had to have red herrings and breadcrumbs and, you know, little plot twists here and there and character arcs and narrative arcs and all that business. So I really had to sit down and be like, what happens before you write it? Don't just steam on in because you will find yourself in a tangle if you do. So with King, I planned it out beforehand, chapter by chapter, and then we sold it to my publisher on a sample with that. But I actually then completely changed the pitch, that the outline, the chapter outline that I'd given them, because it wasn't very good. Well, it was obviously good enough to get a book deal, but it was with a publisher that I'm already published by, so I maybe take that. But I changed it a lot, and I kind of gave myself a chapter outline, and then I kind of let myself go into it. I gave myself some freedom to be able to change things as I was going, and certain things and even plot twists came to me as I was going, so I reworked them in. But I did something else this time in my writing process I've never done before, which was once I'd finished the first draft, I then smashed it to smithereens. I've never done it before, but it actually was really helpful to me. So when I say smashed it to smithereens, I mean like I went into the draft and I like broke every tiny bit down so I could see where my character, how many chapters my characters appear in. So I know that I'm not losing any characters because there's quite a lot of them to keep a handle of. What happens, where plot twists are, where high stakes are, and where things are a bit lower, so I maybe need to rise them up. I'd never done that before, and I had like several documents open at any one time, which were just telling me like, you're missing your character for 6 chapters here, so you might need to like bring them back up here. You maybe need to raise the stakes here. You need to make sure that this is all wrapped up here. I've never done that before, and it's so interesting. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to like data and like delving into like the mechanics of something. So I really enjoyed kind of breaking down my story properly for the first time. So that was something new for the writing process.
That's amazing. I need to do that, I think, because I do tend to do what you said. I get really excited. I'm like, I know what's going to happen in this book. I start writing it, I plow ahead, and I'm like, oh, I've just made a big plot hole and fallen right into it. So yeah, do you do that on a Word document then? You literally just keep track of a thing per Word document, or like would you have a twist document and a characters one or something like that?
I don't think I've perfected it because it was my first time. I think I had a document which was like a list of all my chapters, and then like literally 4 words to tell me like what that chapter was, so that when I was needed to go back to something, or when I needed to figure out what was happening in the story, I could look at that and be like, oh, this makes sense pace wise, or this makes sense character wise. I had a separate document to tell me where my characters were at any given time, because I was like, where are they? When was the last time I mentioned you? Because sometimes, like you'll know as a writer, sometimes you just need a character as like a plot device. It's like, I need you to be able to move this plot forward, but after that I don't really need you again. So, and you can't really do that, especially in a setting where that character would be present. And so I was like, okay, this character served their purpose, but I still need them to be like around, otherwise I'm not a great writer. So I had a separate document for that. So yeah, I had different documents for different things, but I'm still figuring out what works best for me. I've seen people use spreadsheets before and like plan out or plot out their crime or whatever with spreadsheets and like witnesses and all that business, which seems really fun, and it's all color coded. I don't know if I could do that, but yeah, we'll see.
I'd love to see that. I think I need to look at different ways of doing it, because that sounds really good. I might try that for my next book. But yeah, I definitely do a lot of sorting out after the fact. I could probably do like avoid by plotting a little bit better.
Yeah, I think plotting is maybe not my strongest point. I think character is probably my strongest point. And I come up with these like grand scenes or this like a big plot twist when I'm planning something, and it's like, okay, you came up with the plot twist, but how are you getting there first? It's like, god damn it. Write my way there first.
Yeah, well, I think it's a balance, isn't it? I do know people who plot really, really closely, and then the characters still do stuff that they didn't expect, and like, oh, I plotted the whole book around this one central point, and it needs to change. So I think you do need some flexibility, even if you're a rigid plotter.
Yeah.
So in terms of, sorry, I was going to say something else. Do you want to?
I tend to give myself some wiggle room so
Yeah.
that I can kind of move around as I'm writing.
That's cool. So something I imagine that's new, I haven't read your middle grade books to check, is the romance was in this one, and I absolutely loved your romantic scenes. They were really good. You also wrote thrilling scenes and very action driven, and then sort of quiet scenes where the characters were together and they were grieving. Like, I just wondered what it was like to kind of deal with all those different genres almost in one go, and did you have a favorite one to write?
Yeah, it was. I didn't realize it at the time. I realized it after my editor said that it was kind of difficult to put it into like a maybe it wasn't my editor. Someone said to me after they'd read it, like, oh, this is great, but it's like difficult to pinpoint exactly which genre it sits in, because there's quite a lot of different genres that you're toying with. And I didn't realize at the time, but it is true. There are, you know, like you said, the romance scenes, there's action scenes, there's thrilling mystery scenes, and blah blah blah. They weren't actually too difficult to handle, because I'd been writing middle grade before. I was excited to try something new, and it really refreshed my writing when I was doing it. So I got to touch on things that I couldn't touch on in middle grade, such as romance and like these thrilling or like actiony type scenes. And I got to really delve into feelings a bit more. I mean, everyone remembers what it's like to be a teenager when you seem to feel every feeling on the spectrum, and you've everything all at once. You're like this bubbling cauldron of emotions. So it was kind of really fun to properly give. James has a lot going on, and it's a very internal book. I think it's very, obviously it's from James's perspective. But yeah, I found that writing it I've just completely lost my train of thought with that. It just twiddled out of my head. I got to the James bit, and then I was like,
where was I going with this? So the question was about writing different genres, which, you know, I think you've covered. So do you have a favorite one then, after all of that kind of juggling that you did in the romance and the thrills? Like, was there anything that you thought, yeah, I like that the best?
I think I really, really, really enjoyed writing the romance scenes. I think anything with like really significant feelings I enjoy writing, because I actually think it worked my writing muscle in a way that I haven't been able to do in a while, because I've been writing voice-driven middle grade books. But doing the romance aspect and like the grief aspect, I guess, as well, but mostly the romance, it was so much fun. I got to kind of like put myself in my character's shoes and kind of feel how they feel. And I wrote this last year, and you know, we'd been in the throes of a pandemic for a while at that point, and I had forgotten what it was like to have a crush on someone or like want someone really badly. You know, when you've got like that real yearning for someone, or you really love someone, you really like someone, and you want them to like you back. I missed all of those kind of almost teenage emotions. When I have a crush, I crush really hard, and it's like consumes my day. I think I'm quite childish like that. So I really just wrote what I was feeling at the time, because I've missed that aspect of my life, and I kind of threw it into the book. And yeah, I really enjoyed kind of exploring romance elements with James and ...
Yes. Yeah, I thought you did that really well. I love the romance scenes, and I think that's part of the thing about YA, isn't it? You know, whether you're single or married, like I've been married a long time, and I think in YA I get that kind of like that early relationship feeling, but I met my husband when I was 17, so it's been a long time since I kind of had that feeling, and I think that books like yours, it just kind of brings all that back, and I think that's why it's fun as an adult. It's just like an extra level of escapism, to sort of delve into those feelings that you haven't kind of experienced, because I think as an adult your life tends to be a bit more, it's sort of on a level in terms of emotion, I think, quite often, with some exceptions. I think that the teen, like you said, the extremes and all the emotions coming together is really fun.
Yeah, I felt the romance and the grief were the two feelings that James really like feels the most. And I think I'm quite an empath to my characters, so like I felt like I was feeling them as well. So all those like tingly butterfly type sensations when you have a crush for the first time, I was like, oh my god, do I have a crush?
Do you have a crush on your character? That's a whole different question, isn't it? But I think I did a little bit. I had a crush on one of your characters. I'm not going to say which one. I told you beforehand, but I think it'll spoil it if I say who. Yeah,
I think my editor, my agent, all had crushes on him, so I can see it.
You did a good job there then, if we all like the same person. I'm going to move on before I accidentally say that person's name, and check what my next question was. Your publication journey. So I remember we were in the same debut group, and your book just like burst onto the screen, seeing your debut. It did amazingly well. I saw it everywhere, but I don't know how it happened. So what was your journey like before that point?
I make no secret of the fact that I have been very fortunate, and I feel like I've had a very fortunate and I guess lucky experience with publishing, because I absolutely know that the publishing journey can be so long and grueling, and it can seem endless. And I feel like I really had such a lucky time. I will say, and people will disagree with it, but I don't care, because I think it's true. I think every aspect of any kind of success always has an element of luck to it, and people like to say that's not true. If you work hard, you will always find success, and it's unfortunately just not true. In this world, sometimes it's all about timing and luck, even if it's just a small aspect of it or a really big aspect. For me, I wrote a short story for a short story competition, and it didn't win, which was a blessing in disguise at this, but I didn't realize. And there was an agent waiting in the wings who was looking to kind of expand her list of authors. And so she kind of asked if she could take a read of it. And then she asked me if I would think about aging it down. So at the time it was a YA book. And I said, I wasn't sure if I wanted to write kids books. I wasn't sure if I could do it. But I said, I thought it was a good opportunity. I remember saying to my friend at the time, got an agent asking basically to kind of work with me on turning this into a full book. It seems a bit silly to say no, because I know how difficult it can be. I'd already heard about how difficult it was to get an agent. So I was like, I feel like I'm cutting corners here. I was like, it sounds like an opportunity. Maybe I should take this and run before she changes her mind. So I tried writing it as a middle grade. And as soon as I wrote the first 3 chapters, I was like, oh, this book was never anything but a middle grade. I don't know how I couldn't have seen that. So my first agent was absolutely right about that. And I thank her to this day for that. But yeah, after I did that, I did the full draft. I handed it to her. She offered me official representation. It was great. And then we went out on submission, and I think it was just good timing. I think it went out in early 2020, just as the pandemic hit. And I think there was like a thirst in the industry for something that was, to be honest, I think publishers were looking to expand their lists and make them as inclusive and diverse as they could. Not saying that I'm a box ticking exercise. I like to think that I am much more, but but I
Definitely
think
not, Ben, definitely not.
but I think at the time there were lots of discussions happening about the fact that we were struggling to find characters of color, main characters of color, queer characters, queer stories, etc. And there was kind of like a wave of us coming through at the same time. And so I think it was a lot of good timing and luck that I ended up, because I should have probably finished that draft way before I actually did. And it ended up being a really long journey to finishing the draft. And then it went out early 2020. And my publisher, Simon and Schuster, they're fantastic, but they really, they went straight in. They were like, I think it was less than 24 hours later, they were like, we want the book, we're going to make an offer.
Amazing.
So yeah, I was very, very fortunate, and I've been lucky for that to have happened. I'm very aware that it's not the same for every author at all. So I feel very, very fortunate and very, very privileged.
Can I just add talent and hard work as well, Ben? Because you didn't just kind of, that didn't just fall from nowhere. You wrote a really good short story that somebody obviously saw something in. I think it's easy to put yourself down, isn't it, until you fall short. But I mean, I've read your YA book; it's amazing. I'm sure your children's books are just the same.
Yeah, no, I'm always very I'm always wary of just saying it's all luck, or it's obviously a bit of a balance. I do work very hard. I always feel like I have a million things to be doing at one time, and that doesn't help that I'm always like, well, I have another idea. How about this? And that's how King came around. I was in the middle of a deadline and I just couldn't do it. And so I turned to my agent and said, how do we feel about royals? How about that? And she was like, okay, sure.
Your whole book was just procrastination, this whole YA experience.
I was so stuck on my second middle grade Secret Sunshine project. I was so stuck on it, and I had so much internal pressure from me, not from anyone else. And I just thought, okay, maybe I should just try something else. So I was like, I'm behind on this deadline. Do you know what? It can wait a minute. I will come back to it. And yeah, King was born out of procrastination, I suppose.
That's awesome. Yeah, really good procrastination. And yeah, I do agree that luck has to play a part. Like, I found my agent by pitching to her at Yalk, and I pitched to a few different agents, but she was just the one. And she came and found me later and said that she'd been thinking about my book and she wanted me to send it. I'm like, oh, I've not written it all yet. But yeah, I do think there's got to be that element of I could have walked up to anyone, and I walked up to her.
I'm always just very, I think as humans, we want to be told that there is if you follow this step-by-step guide, then you will get this thing. And unfortunately, in pretty much every aspect of life, that's just not how it works. If you want a promotion at work, if you go for a job somewhere else, if you fall in love with someone even, there is an element of luck to that, of you were in the same bar at the same time to have met that person, or you're in the same writing class or something. There are elements of luck to pretty much every aspect of life, and I acknowledge that when it comes to my own work.
Well, that's a really good philosophy. I'm very humble. I think it's good to keep that even when you're being, really successful, and I'm just showering praise on you. To stay humble, that's probably a really good thing. I think I've asked you most of the things I wanted to, so I'm going to get to the kind of silly fun question now. So you can assemble a fictional royal family based on people from any book, film, TV show, and whatever you think. Who would you pick? I tried to do this yesterday and it was such an absolute wreck, so I'll see if you do a better job than me. I kept picking people who were like married, and one was the mother and one was the son. I was like, this is really bad. So come on, see if you can redeem the question for me, Beth.
Now this was my first thought, and this is so bad, but I would love to see Christine Quinn from Selling Sunset.
Right.
In like a royal setting. I can imagine her as one of my own characters. There's a character called Princess Cassandra, who she's a teenager, so different ages, but so it's a character we probably love to hate, and in my head I was like, Christine Quinn.
Just throw one of those into the royal family and see what happens. That's good. Yeah. Okay, so she is the kind of antagonistic member of the royal family.
I would love to see, I would have said Olivia Colman, but because Olivia Colman has done The Crown, then I don't think that's a fair character to put into a royal setting. I would love to see like any of Viola Davis's characters.
Oh yeah.
I was asked once, I think a friend asked me like if it was turned into a movie or a TV show, who would I want to play the Queen Mother? oh, who would I want to play my characters? And I was like, I don't know who I want to play the rest of my characters, but I've never heard Viola Davis do a British accent. I'm sure she could do one. I would love her to be the Queen Mother. I think she suits that role very, very well. Yeah, outside of those two, I really, really struggled because I was like, who would I put into what books and TV shows and movies do I like that I would want to add someone into my royal family? I think those are my two main ones, Christine Quinn and Viola Davis. What a royal family that is.
I know. So can I give you mine? Who's the answer to everything? I feel like
Yeah.
Buffy could make a royal family a little bit more interesting. Like she could add some assertive qualities to some sort of role and get things done.
Definitely.
I don't think people would argue with her.
No.
And again, she was the only one. And I started thinking like Angelina Jolie could be the Queen Mother in like a world. And I was like, Brad Pitt, where would he fit in? I'm like, does that make him father of the king? This is getting really weird. And that was as far as I got. I thought I'm bad at this game. Let Ben take over. And just give my usual answer of Buffy. I normally ruin it for other people. I did an event recently and asked a similar question about thrillers, like who would you want to keep you alive in a thriller? I was like, I'll tell you mine, Buffy, and they all went, oh, she would keep you alive the best. You've stolen the answer. So yeah, I'm going to stand firm by her as my answer to every question.
I think that's a very firm choice. So I believe in Buffy as well.
Yeah. Oh, good. We can be friends then, Ben. I'd have been a bit worried if you'd said that. I'd have to just end the interview here, like, stop, finish. So I'm hopefully going to see you in real life again at YALC. You're appearing on the Sunday, is that right?
Yes, I'm doing a panel. I think the panel's called Give Me My Crown. I think
awesome.
So yeah, I'll be there on the Sunday talking all things King. So I'm very, very, very excited.
And I'm right in thinking that it comes out on the 7th of July? Is that right?
7th of July, yep. And
awesome.
I'm at the 10th, 8th.
How perfect is that? Was that planned, or is this just like the universe giving you a great gift there?
I think a mix of both. I think at the time I wrote it, it would naturally have ended up coming out in the summer, and then it was like, oh wait, I think YALC's here. So I think maybe a tiny bit both.
Oh, so perfect. Now, can you tell us what you're working on next, or is it secret?
It's kind of secret, but I can talk about it in very vague terms.
Okay, I'll say that.
I'm working on my next middle grade book. I just had the edits back through for it, so I'm about to dive back into that project after I just finished working on some final tweaks for King. So yeah, I'm going back down to middle grade, and I'm taking a step in a little bit of a different direction from what I've done before. Both of my middle grade books are very like contemporary, joyful, happy stories. And it still have elements of that in this one, but I'm kind of introducing a fantasy element into the story. It's still set in like a real world setting, but with a fantasy element to it. Maybe something mystical falls out of the sky. I don't know. Maybe that's what happens. But yeah, that is what I'm working on at the minute. I think that's due for publication next. I'm going to say May, but let's just say next year sometime. I don't think that deal has even been announced, so I'm probably giving a scoop here. But
is this an exclusive? Awesome. I'll not tag your publisher in this, maybe. No, I will. I'm sure maybe they won't get to the end. It'll be all right.
It's fine. I think I've posted that I've been working on things before, so I mean it's fine. And then once I've done the edits for that, I'm back into YA, back at YA, doing my next book for that. So
do you know what that one's going to be about yet?
I do, but I'm torn between two different things. I'm torn between whether I want to go one way or another, so I'm just weighing up which to do first, so we shall see.
Well, in that case, I think we should end there, and maybe I'll ask you about that in a minute when we're no longer rolling.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Ben. I knew I'd enjoy talking to you. We met at an event recently, and I thought, oh, he's so lovely and so talented. I feel like I need to get you on the channel as quickly as I can. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you so much.
I've got so much good writing advice from you as well. So I'm going to have to go back through that bit about plotting and make notes and see if I can figure out how to do that in my books. So I hope everybody watching, you've enjoyed that interview as much as I did. Obviously, Ben has got a new book coming out in July, which I hope everybody will want to pick up. So I've got some other author interviews lined up in the run up to YALC that I'll be able to share very soon. So thank you everyone for watching. Thank you. Bye.